because of our freedom and our capacity for self-reflection and responsibility, etc. What I can say with confidence is that the experience of profound uncertainty as to whether we're going to make it is a crucial part of a successful initiative, of a true initiatory rite of passage. Everything's on the line. The biggest message about the fact that both synchronicities are a real phenomenon and that astrological synchronicities are a kind of meta phenomenon that's constantly englobing us and bathing the planet and each of our individual lives with this with these powerful archetypal meanings and indications of the larger drama that's going on, so that we can participate more intelligently in it, more consciously in it. So in that sense, I think that reading the horoscope is basically seeing the forest and not getting too focused on the trees. The forest is basically showing us that we're in a meaningful process, and we need to draw on all of our spiritual experiences, psychological insights, and so forth, courage, imagination, and so forth. We need to bring all this together to meet this transformation, because we're being expected to play our part.
Hey, okay, we're here and we're going to do it. We're going to do something that really is important for you to know. A lot of people have been a little astrology, blah, 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 blah. They have negative or questionable reactions to astrology. Astrology is real in what it does and what it can do and what it is. And we need to be able to connect that with synchronicity, because Jung was doing research on astrological questions. And our guest today is one of the world's leading experts on synchronicity. And I'm particularly interested in not only a previous book of his called Psyche and Cosmos, that was able to talk about the relationship between astrological events and events on Earth, but what can astrology tell us about where we are now, where humanity is now, and perhaps what we can do about it, as astrology might tell us about the future? And our guest today is going to be able to let us know something about how that works. And he is Rick Tarnas. And Rick Tarnas is Professor Emeritus at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, where he was founding director of philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. That's a lot. During his 30 years there, he taught courses in the history of ideas. Much more than that, he also talked about depth psychology, archetypal cosmology, cultural history, and the evolution of consciousness. He has also frequently lectured on the archetypal studies and depth psychology at Pacifica University in Santa Barbara, and was formerly director of programs in education at Esalen in Big Sur. He was there when it was happening and helped it to happen in Esalen. He is the author of The Passion of the Western Mind, and the story I like about that, he wrote this book on Passion of the Western Mind to get to something about astrology, but then the book was so big that he had to write another book about astrology and humanity, if I got that right. His second book, as I mentioned, Cosmos and Psyche, received the book prize, received the Book of the Year prize from the Scientific and Medical Network, of both of which we are members. He is past president of the International Transpersonal Association and has long been a member of the Board of Governors for the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, Rick. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you, Bernie. Yeah, we've known each other almost 2 decades now, and yeah, always great to discuss these these ideas and phenomena that we both recognize are quite significant for our understanding of the cosmos and
The psyche
our moment in history.
and our moment in history. And that's what we're going to be talking about. But what's most important for us right now is to make it clear to our audience, or clearer to those who already know, that astrology is a form of synchronicity. And please talk about that for a while. How is astrology a form of
Sure.
synchronicity?
So first of all, I mean, synchronicity is an enormous phenomenon that just basically pervades life once a person kind of wakes up to uh, the the remarkable ongoing, almost like artistic patterning of life, and the remarkable correlations that happen between often, interstates and external events and things like that that just can't be explained away by some reductionist, materialist uh, understanding. So synchronicity is an ongoing part of life, and astrology is a huge phenomenon in itself. But both of them kind of overlap in the sense that astrology represents a very uh, significant and I think powerful form of synchronicity. It's a subset of the many forms of synchronicity that we can experience in life. And at the same time, synchronicity provides an understanding of, especially for us today, in the modern, postmodern world, it provides us with a way of coming to terms with the otherwise inexplicable correlations between planetary movements and human affairs. I mean, the fact that um, one can do such really careful, kind of qualitative studies of history, of people's biographies, of their psychological predispositions and profile and so forth, and be able to see that the in Jungian and archetypal psychology, depth psychology terms, we could say that there are certain um, enduring archetypal patterns that we can recognize in people's lives, in human history, etc. The fact that those coincide so systematically with with planetary cycles in which specific universal archetypal principles seem to be cosmically connected to particular planetary bodies and the sun and the moon. Uh, how can we understand that in a time when we're quite aware of the fact that this is an evolving cosmos? We the we're not in a geocentric universe. The so much of human so much of the universe and of nature, etc., has been kind of dissected in mechanistic terms. How can the planets be causing something to happen in our intimate inner life? It just doesn't make sense. Now, that of course is also the same issue, kind of philosophical issue, that synchronicity meets, because synchronicities too shouldn't be happening in a mechanistic, materialistic universe that's randomly evolving and has no particular care of what's going on in people's psyche, etc., their inner life. They shouldn't be happening. But if you look back in history, uh, this view of that they shouldn't be happening is a very is a unique and quite recent point of view, because in earlier eras, synchronicities were part of the fabric of life, and let's say in indigenous tribal primordial cultures, there would be, and right up to our own day in those kinds of cultures, there is a one's living in a synchronistic universe, and it's not an issue because the world is seen as alive, animate, informed by it's ensouled. It has an interior life that our interior life participates in, and there isn't this sharp boundary between the Cartesian subject, and the objective world, where we have in our minds the capacity for meaning and purpose and value and so forth, but the world outside of the mind is meaningless, unconscious, purposeless. That is a modern dualism that is just unknown in earlier cultures, earlier societies, and that's the vast amount of human history that for which that's true. So it's only the modern world that has so ratified a disenchanted cosmos in which astrology and synchronicities become seen as a real problem. The other issue is that uh, once the great kind of axial age came with the various uh, powerful world religious traditions and philosophical traditions, like whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, or Judaism, Christianity, or Platonism and Aristotle, Greek philosophy, etc. All of these um, are also quite comfortable with synchronicity, because let's say in the Judaic and Christian traditions, synchronicity is just the sign of providence at work, of God's will. No problem understanding it, because the transcendent divinity has that kind of power and is quite focused on the human spiritual, moral situation, etc. And so synchronicities only become a problem in the modern era, and of course that's where Jung came in, and he's observing them. I mean, I'm sure you've discussed this in many of your previous uh, podcasts, and in your books and so forth. And it's just Jung grappled with it because he too was trained as a scientist and in the modern philosophical tradition. But he can see them happening. Synchronicities are happening to his patients and in his own life with a remarkable uh, consistency, clarity, and to be sure, Jung had an excellent symbolic eye. Um, he could
There's,
recognize
there's
the
no there's no question about that.
yeah,
And Jung and synchronicity, I mean, we're building on what he came up with
exactly.
synchronicity. And we have talked a lot about synchronicity on this show. It's the astrology part of it
Yes.
that is so vital for people to get some idea about. And briefly, I was sitting on a park bench here in Charlottesville, Virginia, next to somebody I'd never met, telling her a story about me at dance where I like to go. And she stops me and she says, "You're a Pisces," uh, which I am. And yeah, I've got a rising sign of Cancer and moon in Cancer Leo, and both my parents were Pisces, so I was filled with a lot of Piscean qualities. Well, that somebody could pick that out from me, just who didn't know me, and out of 12 different astrological signs, say you're a Pisces, is the kind of evidence And I have other experiences
Sure.
running with a rugby ball in Santa Barbara. Uh, and they say I ran like a crab. Well, my rising sign is Cancer. So there's each of these, and Cancer is the crab, among other symbols. So that suggests to me personally that I could see the astrological connection. I think our listeners and our viewers
Yes.
have trouble with making that connection, and you're making certainly the Jung what Jung had to wrestle with, but now you and me with you, Rick, are wrestling with the astrological variant on that, and that's what I'd like you to be able to address directly, because we're going to go to what astrology can tell us about the future of humanity.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And of course, where I was going with Jung is that starting pretty early in his career, he studied astrology, wrote Freud about it around 1911, and by the decade after decade, he was adopting it more and more as invaluable with his patients, et cetera. So he was really thinking through uh, not just synchronicity, but also how astrology could work. And he had many different ideas about that. But moving beyond Jung, yes, you brought up my two books, and Passion of the Western Mind was supposed to be just the introductory philosophical um, preparation to bring the astrological evidence to a public that I knew wouldn't start with an opening to astrology, an open-mindedness about it. And so I needed to kind of give the larger picture, show how the archetypes move from the mythic experience of gods and goddesses to Plato's understanding of them as transcendent, principles of absolute beauty, that Aphrodite is also can be understood as a metaphysical universal principle, and then uh, Jung recovers it, etc. So I was writing all that, and then Cosmos and Psyche. I I thought I could do all that in a 50-page introduction, but it took on a life of its own, as any author of a book that has any level of inspiration behind it. You're not totally the master of what wants to be said.
That's
Uh,
right. That's
so
right.
anyway, at a certain point, I realized, okay, this is a book in itself. I'll publish it. The history of Western worldview, basically, up to the postmodern. And as you say, what happened is that well, it's not just it was so big, it was also that it just got adopted in a lot of university courses, history of philosophy, et cetera. And I became a professor as well. And I just wasn't able to finish Cosmos and Psyche for a number of years. But I finally did, and that's the one that's got the astrological evidence. Now, in terms of understanding how could it possibly work,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I think what we have to kind of, I think the last word, as far as I'm concerned, about how we can comprehend it was said as eloquently as anybody by Plotinus, who was kind of probably he was the greatest of the late classical era philosophers in the Platonic tradition, and he was in his lectures, writings, he was grappling with the fact that there were both mech, the mechanistic perspective about the cosmos was in the air, and so he was grappling with that because he felt that's not adequate to a deeply informed perspective about the nature of the universe. But he also was grappling with astrologers who um, had a more, they thought in terms of causality in a more mechanistic way, in a sense that uh, the planets up there was causing me to be like Mars is in that at the midheaven right now, and that's why I'm angry. And it's making me, it's like a causal relationship. And of course, they had the idea in the back of their mind was the gods are making me do that, um, and that the planets were either the gods themselves or they were uh, the domicile of the god, where he or she lived, etc. And so there was a kind of mechanistic causality that even astrologers could fall into, or at least a very linear um, causality that could be interpreted as a predetermined fate that human beings have. So there was a tendency for astrology also to become deterministic, quite literalistic, literal-minded, and fatalistic in problematic ways. And to some extent, that still is in the air in the astrological world. There is a kind of potential, which I see as a real problem.
And I agree with you. It's like my Mars and Taurus made me do it. And
Yeah,
like synchronicity, um, astrology gives you options. It shows what's possible, but still we have something that still is a modicum of free will to choose how that influence is going to create our next action or influence it.
that's right. So we are in a participatory relationship with these
Yeah.
powerful archetypal forces. Now, how do we get from that planet out there, Mars or the sun or moon, uh, Saturn or Jupiter, whatever it happens to be, and particular experiences that we have, events that take place, personality dispositions, and so forth? Well, I started to bring up Plotinus. Plotinus had this wonderful uh, statement in the Aeneids where he says, the stars are like letters which inscribe themselves at every moment in the sky. Everything in the world is full of signs. All events are coordinated. All things depend on each other. As has been said, everything breathes together. Now, to me, so that's Plotinus, and to me that pretty much nails it. It's not that, like when a clock says it's, let's say 11:30 a.m. as it is here roughly. That's not causing it to be 11:30 a.m. It's reflecting that fact. It's an indication. It's pointing to a larger temporal reality, uh, and that's the same thing with the planets. Like basically, we live in a profoundly integrated universe through and through, in which we are not, as human beings, and our capacities, our consciousness, our capacity for meaning, purpose, etc., are not just anomalies. We are we are the universe with that capacity. We are emerge out of the we're born. It's not like we're born out of the universe. We're the universe in human form, and the interiority and soul goes all the way through the whole universe. It's an integrated phenomenon. It's not this sort of strange dualism where our all of human experience is just some sort of bizarre anomaly in a random universe. It's a much more profound relationship.
Now
So
that reminds me to bring it back to what we are here, us human beings right here. That for a lot of us, people around us mirror our own psyches. That if we look at somebody else is going through, it happens. It's also happening to me. So it becomes a question you can over ask, but it's a question that should be asked. Is like, what is this person's problem or capacity reflecting about myself? And also, what am I reflecting to the other person about that person? So that is a not uncommon, meaningful coincidence between two people and their psyches, mirroring. And what I'm getting at more clearly, and then was this a good way of thinking about it, Rick, is that it's all working together. Plotinus' quote is wonderful, that there's signs all around, which makes people crazy sometimes because you're seeing too many of them. So you have to be selective about them. But what about this mirroring from the individual relationship to the cosmos? How does that metaphor work for you?
Well, I believe that the ancient idea of the anima mundi, the soul of the world, is a valid one, and that we are what Jung called the collective unconscious is embedded in the universe itself. It's not just embedded in the human cranium. It's it's uh, it's embedded in the depths of the cosmos, and we are participating in that. And uh, our, there's a kind of uh, archetypal zeitgeist that pervades each period in history, and then in shorter spans of time, uh, are pervades particular shorter, um, like several weeks or several days or even several hours in terms of the motions of the moon. And so that creates a that feeling that people often have is, boy, it's as if there's something in the air. Everybody seems to be experiencing it,
Yeah, yeah.
or there's something in the water, or whatever.
That's LSD you're talking about there, something
Well,
in
in
the
that case,
water.
right.
That happened.
Um,
It's-
yeah, it wouldn't have too much effect, but anyway, the that is on in a public water system.
That's
I
that's
could,
that's there's something in the air. There's a zeitgeist, and we have different language. I know we do, but there's still some parallel there. So one of the most profound aspects of Cosmos and Psyche was how you were able to show that planets that were square to each other, particularly, would reflect certain chaos in the world at different junctures of world history. And without going through that, our audience can read it. What I'm most interested in is how astrology tells us, as you read it, Rick, what's going on now in this very chaotic world. I mean, how many planets are square to each other right now,
right,
for example? And more than that, just to say where I would like to go with this, what does it mean about the future of humanity? But we start where with now, if you will.
right. Okay, so just to be clear, I think when you're referring to the squares, that's one of the dynamic geometrical relationships. That is the the geometry of how the two planets are with respect to each other and the Earth. So it's like right now there is a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sky, quite tight, like within a degree, and of exact, and they are lined up with respect to the Earth in a tight conjunction. So the conjunction and the opposition, which you can think of as being like the new moon and the full moon of any cycle, like the new moon is when the sun and moon are conjoined, the full moon is when they're on opposite sides of the Earth, and then the squares are the 90 degrees from each other with respect to the Earth. It's those are the three most potent what astrologers call aspects, or we could call geometrical alignments or relationships between the planets. Those are the ones that are most consistently and potently related to historical phenomena, where you can just really see. I mean, the '60s is a perfect example of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction that pervaded that from 1960 to 72 approximately was that period when the more kind of restless, rebellious, creative, liberating, emancipatory impulse that's has a kind of Promethean quality that is connected to the planet Uranus quite consistently in history and in people's lives. Um, it was in a conjunction with Pluto, which is this volcanic, transformational, and often chaotic energy, but also really intensifies and empowers whatever it's touching to extremes. And and that very much characterized the 60s, just as it did, say, the French Revolutionary epoch, when the two planets were in opposition, etc. So I just wanted to make clear it's not just the squares; it's
And I'm glad you made that
sure,
square clearer there, because I just I was
sure,
going like that
yeah,
because I could remember it, but I know the conjunction and
yeah. It's the
is
quadrature aspects, like the four different
yeah,
possible relationships. That's
and that's the
that's what
key. That's
yeah,
what you're talking about, and with Earth right in the middle. Oh, I'm right in the middle, and Earth is somehow related to them because of all the geometry involved. And
yes.
you're
Okay,
able
so
you're able to describe that in your book, and that's what's so amazing.
well, it's if I mean if you know history pretty well, and I spent my life in you know the academic world just really focused on understanding cultural, intellectual, spiritual history, um, major epochs, uh, and to just I mean I was very skeptical about astrology as well too. I mean even coming out of the counterculture as I did, and being at Esalen and at Harvard in the late 60s, I was open to many different kind of new paradigm perspectives and esoteric perspectives, but astrology was the last of the possible ways of it was too far over the borderline for me, and I was particularly working with Stanislav Grof, the psychiatrist and founder of transpersonal psychology, and it was the two of us. We are trying to understand the well, I won't go into all the background of it, but it just turned out that when we reluctantly kind of looked into astrology and learned how to calculate charts, birth charts, horoscopes, and transits, which are the moving planets in relationship to the birth chart, we were just shocked by how illuminating, in a very kind of sophisticated way and consistent way, that astrology, which I'll particularly call archetypal astrology, and it's particularly focused on the planets and the sun and moon. That's where the actions seemed to be most compelling, and the evidence was most compelling. And so we just had to reform our skepticism about it, and realize something's going on here that we need to open our minds to, and have a larger kind of metaphysical horizon to take it in. Now,
You said something very important here that can confuse people and chase them away from astrology, is that so much emphasis is placed on the house of where the planets are being active. And I have stayed away from the house because it confuses me. I tend to be with with the planets themselves. Those are complicated enough themselves
yeah,
for me.
yeah, I mean, each of the planets, like the Saturn principle, I mean, it's related to, yeah, on the one hand, the principle of limit and structure and order, but it also can be oppression and weightiness as a burden, but it also can be weightiness as gravitas, as the wisdom of experience, but it also can be suffering and the difficulties of aging and maturation, but also in the best sense, maturation, but also in the difficult sense of facing mortality and so forth. All that's within the Saturn universe, so to speak. And so archetypes are very richly multivalent.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the free will comes in, because to the extent that you have more self-awareness, uh, you are able to participate in the potentials of that particular archetypal field, and then bring forth the most life enhancing possibilities rather than be subject to the more destructive shadow potentials, which are always there and can and especially tend to wreak havoc when you're unconscious of them, and you become more of a puppet of those energies instead of a intelligent participant, co-creator, as it were. So yeah.
Beautifully said, Rick. Go ahead, keep going, but that's beautifully said.
Oh, thank you. And
You're welcome.
and now there's various house systems in the history of astrology and still to this day. And house systems are an additional frame of reference for pinpointing areas of life that the planetary archetypes might be coming through. But there's, as I say, there's multiple house systems that are posited and that are in conflict with each other at times. And even in terms of signs, there's the difference between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac, where one's used in the East more and the others used more in modernity in the West. But there's a whole complexity around that.
There's a whole lot, but the one you use tends to be the Western one. But let's
Oh, but it's important to, if you read Cosmos and Psyche, I don't focus on the signs or the houses at all. It's totally, because
it's
the most
totally
potent evidence is the planets and their relationships to each other.
that's the point I would wanted to just make right now.
Yeah.
It's the planets and their relationship, which is complicated enough. So, what are they telling us, Rick, about our current
Yeah.
situation in this world?
Well, the biggest thing that's going on, I mean, there's always multiple, planetary
You know, they're
alignments
very
going
busy.
on.
They're very busy.
Yeah, and and so there's different layers to what's going on and different periods in which the that are being shaped. Some are longer periods and some are shorter.
Yeah, yeah.
But the biggest thing that's going on right now is the United States is going through its Pluto return. It's the only one. It's a 248-year cycle, um, and it lasts for about 20 years. We're just past the midpoint of it, and it's an extremely powerful. I mean, no individual human life lasts that long. So we're not familiar in our personal biographies with what a Pluto return is like. We all go through a Saturn return, let's say, as we approach age 30, like basically 28 to 31 or so. And there's quite recognizably during the Saturn return, when it returns to its natal position where it was when you were born, all these typically Saturnian maturational thresholds are crossed all sorts of ways. I won't go into that now, but the Pluto return, what about that? This volcanic, potent, evolutionary, but potentially destructive as well as regenerative energies that it involves. What's the Pluto return about? And the United States has lasted long enough that we're going through a Pluto return, and of course, for better or worse, right now I would say worse, Pluto, the United States is the elephant in the room of the globe, and for it to be going through the Pluto return, where this, I mean, it's kind of like an upsurge of the id, of the repressed, the collective shadow. The underworld has kind of pulled Persephone into itself, Hades, Pluto, and we're going through, it's a death rebirth kind of energy, but it's also can be very destructive, and we're certainly in, I mean, I'm maybe being more political than in implication here than everybody in our audience might want, but it's hard to not call a spade a spade. It's a very Plutonic period, and so the jury's out as to, exactly what's going to emerge out of this. But I mean, it could be a great dying and rebirth. I mean, a dying to an old identity, a recognition of, I mean, the United States is clearly facing its shadow historically in ways that we never have. And that's very important in terms of the psychology of the collective. Um, there's there's other things going on too, like with the Saturn Neptune conjunction. I just gave a whole 3 hour a few months ago seminar on that for the National Council of Geocosmic Research out of San Francisco. But we won't go into all that right now. But what I will say, and I think this is probably the most important thing that I can convey to your audience here, and that is, what does astrology tell us about the long term? What does it say about humanity and its destiny, and so forth? And to to see that, I believe we need to kind of take a step back and take a look at, like, what does it mean that this Earth, which is a moving planet itself, moving around the sun, and as all other planets are moving around the sun, and the sun itself is moving through the galaxy, and so there's this kind of spiral motion as we're all, the whole solar system is moving through the galaxy, but we are just one planet amongst probably billions, and this is one star, certainly among trillions in the universe. What does it mean that there would be consistent correlations between the planetary movements in the solar system and the archetypal patterns of human experience?
Yeah.
And it points to the fact that in some sense, the universe is meaningfully focused on this Earth. It's not the only potential focus of the universe in the whole cosmos, but clearly the Earth is one of those foci or focuses. And in some sense, it suggests that, I mean, if you look at the fact that every individual has a birth chart, and every individual's birth chart unfolds in the course of a life in accordance with the continuing movements of the planets and their transits, as they're called, that activate the potential. And the fact that each of us is living in a universe that is so saturated with intelligent meaning, that is in some sense focused on this Earth, and is also focused on every individual in on this Earth. And in fact, every minute and every year and every period of time is also in some sense a focus of cosmic meaning. It suggests that the universe in some way cares. It's the same thing with synchronicity. Synchronicities, one of the reasons they're can be so psychologically healing and spiritually awakening, is that people suddenly realize, well, wait a minute, it's as if there's some larger intelligence at work that is actually paying attention to my life and to me and to even intimate details in my inner life that only I could know, and yet the universe seems to be meaningfully focused on it. I think the deepest disclosure that the the reality of astrology presents for humanity at this time is that in some profound way the universe is bathing. We're constantly being bathed with a kind of care. It's like a kind of love. Now, one could say love and the cosmos, so like the cosmos is an impersonal phenomenon. Love is a human phenomenon, or something that maybe uh, uh, is characteristic of higher forms of life, etc. But it goes all the way down. Uh, we are, and so while this doesn't let us off the hook, I believe we're in a kind of initiatory crisis, and that humanity deeply needs to both face its shadow, go through some kind of a um, letting a letting go of its old identity, which involves a kind of dying to its old self and its old worldview, and and open up to the fact that we are participating in a much grander, more complex, deep universe than uh, than the mainstream, disenchanted modern perspective allowed us to recognize. And so we
Yeah,
can start to
yes,
move.
yes, 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 and yes, Rick. Open up to the care, what we might call love, that so many people experience when they get out of this body and to experience what's out there. A care could be a word for it. I like the focus that you're saying. Of, it's all this stuff is coming at this little blue marble right here that we're living on. So
Yeah.
let's admit, we and I know that we're going through a major transformation right now here on Earth, and that includes accepting our shadow. Now that we are saying that, let's say it's a given, not that is for everybody, but for this conversation, it's a given. What then does the future of humanity look like within the free will limits that astrology provides for us?
So if we think about astrology basically illuminating, it's like illuminating a kind of, it's almost like a musical score that is given to us. It gives us the great archetypal chordal structures of the unfolding of life. But what melodies we sing to to those chordal harmonies and structures, what dances we dance, that's to a great extent up to us. I mean, they're shaped by the culture may define the genre or whatever that we're working in, but then we bring to it our own individual agency and autonomy and capacity for self responsibility, which I believe the cosmos has painstakingly cultivated in the human being since the get go. And so it's in some sense, I think, been been forging a partner, cultivating a partner
Yeah.
to have in a greater kind of creative interplay than would be otherwise possible because of our freedom and our capacity for self-reflection and responsibility, etc. Um,
Well,
so
as you know, Jung was trying to predict whether marriages could stay together based on astrology, and there are probably as so much other research you know that I don't know. And here's what I am asking. I mean, there are still limits within which astrology, I'll say, illuminates for us. I'll say also constrains us, we could say. And I'm asking you, within what do those limits look like as you cast the horoscope for Earth and for humanity?
well, I
For,
don't have access to the horoscope of Earth or humanity, but what I do have is a very um, sharp awareness that we are going through obviously a poly crisis that we're, whether it's ecological or political or spiritual, et cetera, economic, there, it's all happening. And and so many of the characteristic features of a of a of an initiatory rite of passage that involves facing mortality, uh, deal, great sense of peril, a sense of uncertainty is very big part of it, of like not knowing how it's going to come out, um, of suffering and so forth. There's so many different characteristics of an initiatory ritual. It's as if um, Homo sapiens and modern civilization seem to have seem to be finding themselves, ourselves, in this vast initiatory process in which we are we are being it's a we're being tested, but it's like a birth process. We're having to leave painfully the old womb
Yeah,
and old identities,
yeah.
but in order to be born into a new form. As to whether, in terms of, well, what's the future? Reading the horoscope, as you were putting it, which I can't do. Um, uh, I like. Um, yeah, I think it was Mark Twain who said something like, if you're inclined to predict the future, you should take a nap, something like that. Anyway, what I what I can say with confidence is that the experience of profound uncertainty as to whether we're going to make it is a crucial part of a successful initiative, of a true initiatory rite of passage. You cannot have a pretend near-death experience and have it at a weekend workshop or something and have that be a meaningful, cause a really powerful uh, transformation of your moral values and what you now realize is most important in life, etc. That can't happen if it's just, a kind of um, uh, the outcome is already foreordained, everything's certain, you're not really worried about it, you're just at a weekend workshop and going through the motion. This is everything's on the line, and they're, unlike other rites of passage and initiations for all the great indigenous cultures that knew how to integrate those into their cultural life. Modern culture doesn't have those kind of powerful initiatory rites of passage, but we seem to be going through one collectively. And the we if we are going to come out of it in there were always elders in the past in tribal societies who were kind of guiding the process. All the elders in this case are in the process itself. We're all swept up in it. Nobody's outside
That's
the
right.
system,
That's right.
so
That's right.
that's why anything I say is completely from the point of view of a participant with everybody else in this much larger process.
And that's
But
why I ask you
yeah,
about the horoscope for humanity.
right.
That's really what I'm asking.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Bernie, is that the biggest message about the fact that both synchronicities are a real phenomenon and that astrological synchronicities are a kind of meta phenomenon that's constantly englobing us,
And
and
globing.
bathing the planet and each of our individual lives with this with these powerful archetypal meanings and indications of the larger drama that's going on, so that we can participate more intelligently in it, and more consciously in it. So in that sense, I think that reading the horoscope is basically seeing the forest and not getting too focused on the trees. The forest is basically showing us that we we're in a meaningful process, and we need to draw on all of our spiritual experiences, psychological insights, and so forth, courage, imagination, and so forth. We need to bring all this together to meet this transformation, because um, we're being expected to play our part.
We're
It's
being expected to play our part. And in the list you just gave us, Rick, you had imagination. And imagination is so important as part of what human beings can do. And it's being robbed by technology in all kinds of ways so that our attention is away from what we can imagine. And that's part of the transformation. And what I'm really asking is not necessarily, I like the idea of a horoscope for humanity. It's fun to think about that. What I'm asking for is more clearly, uh, what can we imagine? Because we have this free will thing that's very clearly limited, but we have to do it. We're in the midst of a lot of uncertainty. We have to accept that, and that's hard for people, but that's what we have to do. And in the midst of this uncertainty, I am asking you about what can we imagine collectively as as possible outcomes from all this chaos.
We could imagine a world in which humanity wakes up to the fact that it's a member of a larger Earth community that also has dignity, spiritual dignity, value, that we come into an I-thou relationship with the rest of, like, the animals, the plants, the oceans, the larger world that we're part of, and not think of ourselves as being apart from it and needing to master it and exploit it for our own self-enhancement. So that would be one thing, is to imagine a world where we are members of a an ensouled Earth community, in I-thou relationships rather than I-it relationships, to use Martin Buber's famous distinction. I would also imagine um, a world in which we wake up out of tendencies towards drawing boundaries and xenophobic reactions to other peoples, other religions, other ways of life, and so forth, and come into recognize how much we, in the case of xenophobia and anti-immigrant or or racist or patriarchal sexist attitudes, whatever forms these can take, it's a projection. It's we People project their shadow onto people. They think that they're the problem, uh, or there's something intrinsically evil about them, or inferior, or they're just vermin, etc. That's the sign that the shadow is being projected. And so, in many ways, I believe, in terms of imagining, we could imagine a world in which human beings become a little more empathic, psychologically self-aware, capable of recognizing projections, which we've been being taught for many years, for centuries, by our spiritual traditions, to recognize that the um, the mote that we're seeing in the other person is a beam in our own eye. The kind of biblical recognition of what projection's all about, or what Peter says about Paul, tells us more about Peter than about Paul very often. So those are the kinds of uh, mm, those are some of the positive forms of imagining the future that I would draw on. And I'd also just point out that imagination, there's the moral imagination, the spiritual imagination, the relational empathic imagination, etc. And I believe that what we're being asked to do is to bring the full range of human faculties to the table, and not just limit ourselves to a narrow form of empiricism and rationalism in assessing the nature of reality. Reality is is responsive to our whole self, and not just like these narrow, what we would call in philosophy, epistemological channels that are the only ones we allow to be true data. That's just a prejudice, and it's a deeply destructive one. So I imagine a larger range of human faculties being exercised.
Now we're coming to the end of this delightful conversation, Rick. And, and I'm coming to the conclusion, having asked you a couple of questions in different ways, that we can't use astrology to help predict the future of humanity.
Not, not, no, because so much depends on our choices, our actions. What it's a uncertainty goes is an essential part. We're
It's,
living in an open universe,
yes, yes.
and uncertainty is crucial to this moment. And so, uh, and it's and the thing about the astrological predictions is that astrology is archetypally predictive. It's not concretely predictive.
Yeah, yeah.
So archetypally, we can see that there's very powerful Plutonic forces at work right now that we were talking about. And, I've written at length about that in Cosmos and Psyche. And that doesn't tell us, are we going to uh, be able to draw on and express the most life enhancing potentials of the Pluto archetype or of any of all the other archetypal powers, or are we going to be bringing forth the most destructive because we're so unconscious of it and projecting left and right and so forth as a kind of tyrant.
Well,
Will the
you've answered a question that I started really with and was trying to be able to have some idea about. And it ends up being up to us. And so let me ask you about using astrological charts individually, because a lot of people use them to get some idea about where their life might be going. And what do you think of that?
Oh, I think it can be immensely valuable. But again, with the recognition that, I mean, an astrologer should never give a person a reading as have an astrological session which are interpreting the person's birth chart, um, perhaps their transits, and then the person that is getting the reading comes away with a feeling of profound limitation or being condemned to a fateful result that they don't have. That's an abuse of astrology. That's not
Yes.
how astrology works. It's
Yeah.
wounding, and that's
Yes.
and so. But at the same time, in the right hands, used in a good way, astrology can be extremely beneficial and give us a insight as to, oh, now I have a better idea why I'm having these feelings right now, or why, or I think I got this particular kind of energy. Let's take the Mars anger thing, like with that Mars transit going right across my moon right now, I should be a little more self-aware about just flying off the handle an irate response, without thinking to what I see as a behavior that I need to justifiably react to angrily. That's like, maybe I should think about, take a breath and think about, I wonder whether I might be projecting a bit into the situation, and maybe I could use that Mars energy in a different way, like um,
Yeah, it's
do
okay.
do a
It's okay.
run or
Yeah,
lift
do a
weights
run
or
or
build something.
go to the gym. Yeah, go, it could. Yeah, that that, and we're not going to have time to go through it, but that's really what I was trying to get up to here with humanity. I mean, the idea of an astrological chart, a horoscope for humanity, like you got to know when when the thing started, and it's a little hard to know that, and what where the planets were,
A little,
but
yeah.
yeah, it's a little hard to know that. So you make some guesses, maybe. I don't know where it would start, but just what you said about Mars transiting and energy, and that that humanity can be alert if there's an analogy there to what might be coming. might be coming and have options about how to behave and how to respond. And that's really the direction I was going. But I think you're implying, and I'm getting directly, is that we can't do a horoscope for humanity because we don't know when it was born.
Right, but we can, but in terms of what I think is the deeper layer to your question and your quest is that we look at the meta situation that astrology allows us to see, which is that we live in a meaningful universe in which our fate, individually, collectively, is is a focus of cosmic intelligence, and that to me is healing in itself. It moves us out of the state of being a kind of isolated egomaniac who thinks that we're the only game in town.
Oh yeah, we got to get. We're getting. A lot of us are getting out of that one. That's for sure. But astrology can help us think about being out of that because of the permeation, whatever the right word is of love or care, however we define it. That this little blue thing that we're on is the focus of a lot of energy from the universe. And if there's any message I think you're giving us, it's that.
Yes, I agree.
Well, Rick, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. It's really been fun, wonderful, educational, and it's great to see you again. So thanks
Thanks
for
a lot.
thanks for
Yeah,
talking with me.
thanks, Bernie. I hope that your audience, our audience today, but your continuing audience might find something of value in what we've talked about, and always good to see you.
Thank you.